Well, I've been at UGA for a year now, and this is kind of a mix of homework, stuff I do on my spare time, and we have some, at the end here is Drawing 2, which I just finished a summer semester of. 8 a.m. in the morning, every day, straight, for 8 weeks. It was intense. I kind of like just go around and start with one, kind of give you my idea of where I was headed with it, and kind of hope it kind of reach that goal. So this was actually Drawing 2 as well. This is an ode to Matisse. The assignment was to take a famous work, so any kind of painting whatsoever, and we could switch out the subject matter, but we had to keep the same color scheme involved. So I found this interesting abstract work that was very simple, just a squared face with red-blue side of the face and hair, obviously the mix of the two colors being green. And I've always been kind of drawn to the portrait. I don't know why, but when I start drawing, I immediately start drawing the facial structure, the eyebrow, and into the nose and the eye cavity. And so I just constantly keep going back to it. So that's what I went with this. And I took a photo of Kirby against her, I guess, permission, and then printed it out and took it to class. And this is, it's watercolor, but it's watercolor pencil. So I actually was able to draw it first, and then add the water on top to get the watercolor effect. And that took about a week or so to finish. And it was kind of interesting because even though it was pencil, it was still had that unforgiving watercolor tendency of once it's there, you can't erase. So this was a one-shot go, and I was actually quite happy with it. And then we get to move on to one of the first underpaintings I did. And I call these underpaintings because I buy them off the shelf, and that's all I do with it, really. I just take it straight from the shelf. I don't remove the wrapper. I leave the price tag on. I leave anything on that came with the actual piece of art, or the piece of raw material, because this whole concept of that all I'm taking is the raw material, but then when I present it to you, it's art. And where does that change? What happens in between, other than me just putting paint on it? All of a sudden it goes from $11.98 and some tax to $50 right here. And so the concept was I look at it completely different than what a viewer looks at it when I'm finished. And that's kind of interesting to me. So I was wondering what happens if I kind of mold those two endpoints. If I take the raw materials and add it to the art, what happens? Is it art at that point? Now is it art, even though it has 4 price tags on it from where it has been marked down? Do I mark it down? What is the difference? What's the significance if I leave who actually made the canvas? You know, when you look at a piece of art, you don't see a signature from who made the canvas. That guy doesn't exist anymore. He just makes the canvas, and then I make all the millions of dollars or whatever off of the huge, fantastic piece of artwork. And kind of the beginning man is kind of just cut out of the picture altogether. So it's kind of like an invisible backbone that doesn't get any representation whatsoever. So it was just kind of a mix there. The way I actually did these was a lot of fun too. What I did was, at first I tried the syringe idea. That didn't work. The paint was just way too thick to get through. So I almost abandoned it, but went back and tried one more time, and I took an X-Acto knife, and I slit the canvas just in the tiniest spots. Wherever I was going to inject paint, that's where I would slit the canvas. And then I took the color I wanted to and put it into the bottom of the Ziploc bag. So right here I took the red first, and then on top of the red I scored it on the green, and on top of the green I scored it on the yellow. And I took all the air out and I zipped it closed, snipped the corner and slipped it right under where I slit onto the canvas, and then taped it down and squeezed it in, and I would just watch what would happen. It was kind of a lot of fun because I didn't realize that in the subtraction of air, you can really see it in this one. Once you remove air from the picture, the paint doesn't mix. It just stays the same color. And you get slight mixation once you get further on into the end of it. But as far as the beginning goes, there's almost like no change in whatsoever in the value or the color. And so that was a lot of fun, a lot of experimenting, and kind of a 2 stones with 1 bird. Here is Lenny, Nature versus Society. Once I moved to Athens, I'd been looking around for a lot of shows, and since I didn't have much class to worry about, I was able to have 5 shows for 5 months. I was in, let's see, I believe 2 restaurants, the show that this got into, a show in Monroe, Georgia, and it was somewhere else, perhaps, a clothing venue. And so that was kind of the rhythm I was trying to keep going, 1 show every new month. And eventually summer came and everybody went home. I didn't realize that happened in Athens. Summer in Athens, there's no one there. And so this was a lot of fun. I'd heard about the show. It was called the Linden House Gallery. And they did a yearly exhibit. And you can have all cell phones on song. But no, so what happened was I'd heard about this show called the Linden House exhibit. And it's a yearly thing, annually. And I was like, oh, I'll try that. That's no big deal. And so I heard about it a week before the deadline, so I figured I'd better jump on it. And I just found this big sheet of paper that I'd had hidden away. And I just recently reread Of Mice and Men. So this comes from the end of Mice and Men. And I thought it was really interesting because, I mean, here was Lenny. I'm not sure how many are familiar with the story. Hope I don't ruin it. It's a fantastic story. Lenny at the end is killed by his best friend because he actually he's not politically correct. He's just a very, very sweet guy, normal as far as nature standards are. But when it comes to society, he's an outcast because he's slow. He's not all there. And so he doesn't do things socially correct. He doesn't realize that you can't just run up to a small girl and touch her dress because he likes the way it feels. And so at the end, it comes down to either let the mad mob that's chasing him for accidentally killing a girl by just accidentally wanting to touch her hair because it felt soft, or let the mad mob get a hold of him, or his best friend pull the trigger. And I found the last chapter very interesting because you realize once he comes to the woods, his hideout, where he's supposed to wait for his friend because he just follows the rules. He doesn't understand them, he just listens. And he gets to the wooded area, and they mention that he takes off his hat and sets it aside, and he takes a sip from the water. And then he starts to have all these delusions, but nothing else begins to reference society. He's sorry now, but he's not sorry because he killed a girl. He's sorry because he upset his friend. He knows his friend's going to be mad. So what I noticed, the trend there was that there was no more mention of society at all. There was no more mention of rules or laws or punishment. He was just upset that he had accidentally upset his friend, and he was sitting there, I think he was having a conversation with a bunny at one point, very odd delusion. And so I began thinking about that, how he was being executed by society, even though he didn't deter off of anything that was natural. And so I just took that concept, and that's why he's nude, because I didn't want a fully dressed, clothed, very society correct man. He's not nude in the book, don't worry about that. But I did like to take note to the setting aside of society and to see what happens. And so I finished it in about 5 to 6 days, and I luckily went and bought the frame when I started. I didn't even know what I was drawing at the time I bought the frame, and submitted it to the gallery. And I waited my 2 weeks, and I got my acceptance letter, and they had said, you've been accepted with this piece. And so I started to tell my art teachers about it, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into at the time. This was actually the biggest gallery in Athens, and several of my professors told me that they have friends that work at UGA as professors that have been trying for 10 years to get into the show. This is a 30-year running show, and some people just never ever get in. And I was completely blown away by that idea that I actually got in on my first attempt. So that was a good kind of go-getter thing right there. And then this is the same idea as the underpaintings. This one sold for $250, and just another experiment with the colors.